strings attached. So my history was maybe medical school, maybe being a musician, but really I got involved in theater when I was in my teens, and by my 20s had dropped out of school and become a theater technician professionally. So all of this rigging was part of that knowledge base. I was a touring roadie for opera, dance, rock and roll. So that vocabulary is very, it comes very naturally to me now. So I conceived of the rigging scheme, and then the park has a consulting engineer named Bob Bush, and Bob, I sent him all the drawings, and Bob and I spent 2 weeks going back and forth, working out what became the final rigging structure. So what we've done, if you look up, we've transferred the load of the glass up onto the steel structure. And so right at the beginning of the project, when I talked to Bob a year and a half ago, he said, I know we can do this, so go off with your project and we'll dial it in as we get closer. So, and oddly enough, like most things, I didn't dial it in until the month before, just because of how things work. And so what we've done is we've hung hardware called Unistrut. It's a modular building system. The wires come out of the brackets up here and on the amber drape, go into floor brackets that lock it in. The wires on this actually come from the floor up, and they're locked in up top. That has to do with, I wanted that to be a straight line to no curved wire coming through the bracket. So we started here. So once the wires are up, we start building from the bottom. The glass comes in sheets 32 by 22. The first iteration of this project, Kobe, one of my assistants, hand drilled 4,200 holes. When we were faced with this project that has 16,450 holes, I said we can't hand drill these, so these went to a water jet machine. Little teeny nozzle, 54,000 pounds of pressure, 54,000 PSI, with water and grit, drilled all these holes. What we can do by hand in 26 minutes, the machine can do in a minute and a half. And more accurate. No. Each panel, so 16 holes by hand, took actually more than 26 minutes, and by machine took a minute and a half. Once the holes are in the sheets come to the studio. The sheets are all cut into these sizes. You'll see there are broken lines and everything's not square. That's on purpose. If we wanted them to be all perfect, I would have sent them off to a different type of cutter that would have cut them by computer, but I didn't want that. I wanted the handmade look. So, and then the tying system are these handmade copper rivets, I call them, but they're ties. And they're made by taking a piece of copper wire, torching the end, and the copper melts and balls back on itself and basically re-welds itself. Each copper tie, when I began this whole thing, we had them destructive. I destructive tested them. Each tie can hold 27 pounds itself.
Really?
Just this little teeny tie can support 27 pounds.
You've got a nice cable on the back.
No, the cable, this can hold 2,000 pounds.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. But each one of these little ties itself can hold 27 pounds. We tested it to breaking many times. So to make the ties, you have a piece of wire, you melt the end, and then I was dropping them onto cardboard just because that was the work surface, and they were making these beautiful marks. So I called this friend of mine that's a printmaker, and I said, hey Leslie, how would I translate these marks into printmaking? And she said, forget the printmaking, make direct drawings. So that's what these are. This is called, well, it really is called, it's called mapping 16,000 parts, but it's really called 16,000 marks. I think that was an earlier title I never corrected. So these drawings that are up and around here, these are probably, I think it was 130 drawings made, something like that. And before I came here, I culled my favorite 25, and then I left a note when I left for the curators. Dear curators, curate, please. And so they picked out of the 25 what they wanted to show. and they're purposely not framed as being kind of process objects. I do wish there wasn't, the humidity is getting to them, so that little bit of a buckle. But you know what? They're objects and they're fine. So, an introduction to my little mind. So somebody might just take a ruler and draw this line, and that would take 3 seconds. I used over 1,200 marks to create this line over the course of a full day. So, and I know pretty much how many marks are in each one of these, because when I make those rivets, I put them in piles of 10, and then 100, and then 1,000, so I know what I've done each day. Blue Horizon at the other end is made by the same technique, but as I began to formulate this, I knew, so you walk in here and it's vertical. And I knew that if you saw this and walk in the other end, you almost would expect another vertical structure or something. So I was just thinking and thinking and thinking, and then I abandoned that end of the building and was going to put the 3 objects that are up top in that end, and Tom, the curator, said, no, absolutely not. And this is when a curator really kicks in. This is a good thing. He said, no, first of all, I went to bat with the board for your budget, and we got your budget, and I want you to stretch yourself. I want you, like, what's the problem? Finally, he said, oh, I'm wrestling with that end, and I don't know, verticality, time, we had 3 weeks to install. And he said, no, I'm not buying it. You go back to the drawing board. And about a week later, I came up with that, which I'm very happy with. It's really just meant to be this placid kind of, do you know the color field painters like Yves Klein, Mark Rothko, etc.? And the one I like to talk about the most is a guy named Joe Marioni, who is very well known in Europe, but he still paints in a walk-up studio, I think in Times Square, same studio since the 60s. I saw a lecture of his once, and he stood on a table, he clicked his heels, and he said, I paint, this is a paraphrase because it's so many years ago, but he said, I paint because I'm interested in the image. And I layer upon layer of the saturated color. So color field painting is really about this reflected light, but also the depth of the color. So I kind of set about, when I started this whole series of work a few years ago, was to create color field paintings that you're walking in. So Blue Horizon very much speaks to that. If you look at my white shirt, which is why I have a white shirt on, for the opening last night, I wore a white shirt and white pants. So I could be under here, and if you see there, I turn a little bit of a hue of blue. What else can I answer? Is that really went off track?